Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is seat taken?
Hey, Kiernan.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
So are you in one piece? When last we left, you were about to embark on your first time skiing, and I was extremely worried.
So I took the ski lift up the mountain, and I am still there. I haven't been able to get down. They say that the ice melts at some point.
You brought your podcasting equipment with you. That is devotion.
There was I figured this might happen. Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I did not have a great time skiing. I had a great instructor down there at Platteville Mountain, and they spent 2 hours with me, and I fell a lot. And I had a hard time with like the wedging and the stopping.
The wedging. Now, when you say the wedging, you mean when you put the skis facing into each other?
Yeah, when you stop essentially. So I would just kept banging into that. Hit the wall, hitting things. And it wasn't great.
Now, I saw you posted a picture of yourself in your slim-fitting onesie.
Multiple compliments.
I'm sure you talk to yourself all the time.
I mean, people on the trail were, one of the people who were skiing was like, "I need to get myself one of those." I don't think they were kidding. I think they were.
My question is, in a still photo, the onesie looks, pretty good. You got the angle right from what I saw. Now, my question is, are there any videos in existence of you trying to do the ski wedge and in your tight little onesie and going on the small incline and falling? Does that video exist?
I don't want to say, because I believe that such video could exist. I've been told it does. I haven't seen it. I don't want to see it.
So here's what I'm going to ask. If you would just ask your boyfriend to text it to me separately off chain. Now, I have many embarrassing photos of you that.
Yeah, I don't know that you need additional things for that file.
And I've never posted them to the Out of Office Insta at OOO podcast. And I just use them purely for my own enjoyment. And then once or twice a year, I send it to you with no context and make you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. And it's noticed and appreciated.
All right, Ryan. Well, now today we've got yet another one of our classic interview episodes, and this time it's you doing the interviewing.
Yeah, I'm talking to Christoper Elliott, who is a travel writer who's written for the Washington Post and USA Today. And we chat a bit about, what is happening with COVID-19 travel and what we can expect over the next year or so, as folks start to get vaccinated and start to get back out on the road.
So, Ryan, do you plan on getting into the nitty gritty of all the testing requirements? Because that's the thing that's got me most on edge right now. Is it sounds like even once you're vaccinated, we may have to prove the vaccination some way, but also you may have to schedule time for a test, get the results back in time, and have some sort of proof to fly internationally, to get back into the country, even maybe to fly domestically.
Yeah, we talk a bit about the requirements internationally, the idea of what you'll have to show to prove that you've had a test. And it looks like today that the administration has signaled they're not really interested in moving forward with a domestic testing requirement before you get on a domestic flight. But that is something we touch on in the interview as well.
Sounds very useful and informative. It's so useful and informative that I would suggest maybe we jump right in.
Yeah, I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Welcome, Christoper, to Out of Office, a travel podcast. We really appreciate you coming today.
It's totally my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So can you start off with telling us a bit about yourself as both a travel writer and an advocate for travelers?
Well, I kind of wear two hats. The first is as a journalist. I cover travel for the Washington Post and for USA Today. I write columns that appear on Sundays in the Post and on Monday mornings in USA Today. And I also write a nationally syndicated column called The Travel Troubleshooter, which is a real quick Q&A column that takes a seemingly intractable travel problem and then fixes it. And I also do some work for Forbes, and I publish 2 websites. So between all those things, and I also have a Substack newsletter. I almost forgot about that's my newest thing. That is a newsletter called Elliott Confidential, and you can find that at Elliott Confidential, ELLIOTT confidential.com. And that comes out about once a week, sometimes more often. And it is the think piece for the week. So it's just things in travel that have been happening and what we should make of it. So for example, I had a commentary last week on airlines and hotels that were pushing people to travel even at a time when it's unsafe. And I always get myself into trouble for those things. So that's the first thing that I do. The second thing that I do, though, is that for about the last 20 years or so, I have been an advocate for not just travelers, but for any consumer. And I've founded 3 nonprofits. The latest is called Elliott Advocacy. I know, really original name, and you can find more about that at elliott.org. And our mission is basically to help people, to empower travelers and consumers to solve their own problems, and then to help them if they can't. So we do 3 things. We have a research department that researches the names, numbers, email addresses of managers at these companies, so that if you do run into a problem, you can reach out to them online, maybe send them an email or call them and get help. We also have a service where we will advocate a case for you if you've got an issue and you can't get help through normal channels. We have a team of advocates that includes me, and we'll contact the company on your behalf. And then the third thing we do is journalism. We actually write about these cases and then tell people how they can avoid a similar problem. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. And I hope I didn't take too long with my answer.
No, that's great. So tell me, just sort of off the top, how have folks, what kind of complaints have consumers had in this COVID era, that have really differed from what it was like before?
We've had 3 types of complaints: refunds, and refunds. People are, after COVID happened, they had to cancel their vacations, and the travel companies basically didn't want to give their money back. And so we've been busy for the last year dealing with thousands upon thousands of refund cases.
And are there particular industries that have been especially bad about issuing refunds? Because I feel like the airlines, the heavily regulated industries have been pretty good about it, right?
You would think so. Initially, the airlines were not very good about that. They wanted to find some way of keeping people's money. Under the Department of Transportation regulations, you are entitled to a refund within 7 business days if your flight has been canceled by the airline. Airlines canceled their flights. Suddenly, they owed all this money, and they didn't have the money to pay it, or they didn't want to pay it, either one or the other. And it took many, many weeks and many complaints for the DOT, then under the Trump administration, to finally get off its stuff and do something about it. So they finally in April, I believe, issued an advisory saying, yes, we really meant it when we said you have to issue refunds. So airlines and U.S. airlines finally fell into place around May. The problem is, though, that for international airlines, that didn't happen. Air Canada, one of the worst offenders. You have TAP, the Portuguese carrier, also not the best when it comes to refunds. And in fact, you saw a lot of European carriers appealing to the EU to say, hey, these are extraordinary circumstances. We shouldn't have to refund these flights. Let us give people credit. And right. the EU said no. So airlines, we could spend hours talking about how bad airlines were. But then the other group were tour operators. Tour operators were caught in a really difficult position because they had taken all this money from people, and sometimes they had paid the hotels or the airlines or the events that they had booked, and then everything got canceled, and then the tour operators had to basically refund the money, and in some cases they had terms and conditions that allowed them to keep the money or charge a really hefty cancellation fee, in one case above $1,000. And they did a lot to try to keep people's money as well.
I mean, that's just sort of surprising to hear, because the narrative that I had in my mind was that, for the most part, they were being pretty generous. But I didn't have any international trips planned at the time that I tried to get my money back. So maybe that was part of my good luck.
Well, I think that the hotels did really well, and the cruise lines did exceptionally well. Hotels need a little nudging. The cruise lines offered an immediate refund. Most of them did. Some of them less immediate than others. But when they finally got around to it, they were among the first to really get it. And they not only stopped all cruises, but they offered either a full refund or a 125% cruise credit. So that's where, and they got a lot of good publicity from that. But in general, I would say the travel industry gets probably a grade of a C- for handling refunds during the pandemic.
Well, I appreciate the work you did to try to help consumers get some of that money back, and we'll make sure to link to your website so folks can see some of the work you're doing there.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So jumping into some of these questions around the future of COVID travel, I know that you've been writing a lot recently on a proposed regulation to require COVID testing before domestic airline travel. Can you talk a bit about where we are on that regulation? Is it do we think that's going to happen, and what's the timeline on that?
When the Biden administration took over, one of the first things it did was it required a mask rule for any mass transit, including airlines, and then also in terminals. That's something that the previous administration had not done, refused to do. And that changed travel a lot. I think it probably made it a lot safer. But the other thing that it did was it imposed a new rule that you would have to have a negative PCR test taken within 3 days of returning to the United States. So that was for inbound traffic to the U.S. No matter, nationality doesn't matter. If you're coming back to the U.S., you have to show negative COVID test. What's being discussed now, though, is having a negative COVID test for any domestic flight as well. So you saw a couple of days ago, Delta CEO really came down hard on that idea. And the reason why is that COVID tests cost a lot of money. You can get one for free, but if you just need one for a flight, you could pay anywhere from $80 to $800 for a COVID test. And that means that the cost of your flight, the average cost is somewhere around $100. So if you're flying somewhere with your family of 5, you're adding $500 to one leg of that trip. So you're flying to see grandma in Los Angeles. Well, that's $500, and then flying back is another $500. So all told, that would be $1,000, and that really prices a lot of people out of travel, air travel, and so that makes them either drive or stay home entirely.
And don't you think that's probably part of the plan, though, to de-incentivize folks from being able to travel?
Well, that's a good point. If you want to de-incentivize people to travel, though, you should just not give the airline industry any aid. I'll let them all go out of business, and then people won't fly. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry to be a little bit smug about this, but it's kind of like you can't have it both ways. You can't support the airline industry and then tell people not to fly. I think the government is kind of in a very difficult position now.
Sure.
Where they want people to fly, but they want them to fly safely. Flying safely, obviously it would be safer if everyone got tested. But I also think that we're probably our distribution of the virus in the United States is, you got some places that have it better or some places that have it worse, but it's pretty bad everywhere. So I don't know if, changing the testing requirements for domestic flying is going to make a difference. The other thing to consider too is that if you're going to be if you really are concerned about people crossing state lines, potentially infected, you have to look at cars too, because 88% of all trips are taken by car. Less than 1% are taken by plane in the United States. And, what are you going to do? Start testing people at state lines to see if they have COVID? I don't know. That seems like a slippery slope.
Yeah, and so that was like one of the judgment calls that sort of I made personally, as somebody who loves to travel earlier on in this pandemic, was like to try to limit my plane travel or not travel at all by plane and just do drives to cities like Charleston or, places where I could be more outdoors. And I was in New York City at the time. So, I wonder if other folks, made that judgment call based on just because, when you're in a plane, you're in an enclosed area, with a lot of strangers. And if you're in a car, you're in an enclosed area with, in theory, people that are in your quote unquote pod or whatever. So I can see the arguments there. But so I'm wondering, like, do we think that this is something? Because obviously this would be a big change in domestic travel. Is it looking like this is something that is still just being discussed, or is there a good likelihood that this rule would come down? Because this would definitely be one of the biggest travel restrictions we've seen in the entirety of this pandemic.
Oh yeah, it would be huge. Can I ask you, when is this going to post? Because this
will post on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, okay. Well, we don't know what's going to happen between now and Tuesday, but
sure.
If this did happen, it would be huge. We know that the airline industry is really fighting this hard. If it happens, it would be a devastating blow to the airline industry because people would just start canceling their trips. They would say, I refuse to pay for a COVID test, or they wouldn't book any new trips. I would also argue that there was a survey done of epidemiologists, and they found that the most dangerous part of your flight is not the airplane. The airplanes are actually clean and fairly safe. Not 100% safe. It's somewhere on the order of going to the grocery store. That's about the same level of exposure. The more dangerous part is the airport, because there's people congregating at the airport. They're taking off their masks and eating and drinking. They're doing a lot of very unsafe things. And unsafe in terms of potentially getting an infection. And so I think that an argument could be made that driving is, in some cases, in many cases, maybe even more dangerous than flying. And the reason is, if you're taking a long trip, you are getting out of the car to put gas in the car. That's, those high touch areas when you're putting gas in the car at the gas pump, that's a potential infection. When you're eating in a restaurant, you're in an indoor area, especially during the winter, that's another opportunity for an infection. Even if you're going to a grocery store to, buy a couple of provisions for your trip, you're also potentially exposing yourself. So I'll put all those exposures together, and it is possible that the car ride, even if you're in a car in a bubble with your pod, you still have more of an opportunity for an infection. And then if you're traveling with kids, it's even worse because, if you have a 4-year-olds touch everything, and then put it in their mouths. Well, actually 2-year-olds do that. If you have a 4-year-old doing it, you've got a big problem. So, you've got, if you've got 3 or 4 kids with you, it's just, you probably should be staying home. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that it really, it's kind of unfair to single out air travel.
That's fair enough. So what do you think? So what do you think? The fact that we're still having this discussion this many months into the pandemic means that we're not in the clear yet, right? So when do the airline industry actually expect to begin to ramp up flights again? When do they expect people to start traveling again? Are there sort of conversations happening now about when the U.S. will have enough vaccines, when they expect people to really start traveling to some degree in the amount that we used to?
I talked to some experts about it. The consensus seems to be second quarter of 21 for domestic air travel. That's when things are going to start looking more normal. So that means April, May, June, and then fourth quarter for international travel. That's October, November, December of this year. I think that those might be a little bit optimistic. I think that so much depends also on these dangerous new variants that we've seen from Brazil, the UK, South Africa, and then also the vaccine distribution. How fast can we get a vaccine? I got to tell you from my own experience, I just wrote a story last week for the Washington Post, and it appeared this morning on the website. And in the lead, I say, I'll probably be the last person to get a COVID vaccine. Well, guess what? Last Thursday, I got an email from my healthcare provider, and they said, hey, we've got some vaccines. Would you like one? And so on Saturday, I went in and I got my first Moderna shot. So
jealous.
I got to tell you, though, it's not without its side effects. We could talk about that. But, so I think that things are probably going to change faster than we think they are. But on the other hand, I don't know about the uniformity of the vaccine distributions. So in the United States, we might be okay, but other countries might not be okay. And you have to remember, if you're going to another country for a vacation or a trip, and they still have a lockdown or a lockdown-like attitude toward restaurants, public events, things like that, it's not going to be much of a vacation, and you might not want to go.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. So you wrote a piece a couple weeks ago about where travelers want to go after the pandemic, and it doesn't seem like some big surprises, but places like Florida and California where you can be outside and be in the water, or be on the trail or something, seems to be the destinations that people are thinking about. I see someone else in the article mentions Hawaii. That would be a lot of fun, obviously. And any other trends you're seeing like that? Like what are people thinking about in terms of vacations, this year?
Well, when I wrote that story, I was expecting people to tell me, yeah, I really want to go to Borneo. I can't wait to go and, to Kazakhstan, to some place they'd never been to, because they just had this brush with their own mortality, and they wanted to go somewhere that was on their bucket list. Instead, people told me they wanted to go to the same places that they'd always gone, which was, really boring, a little disappointing. They were saying things like, oh, yeah, I want to go to Paris and London and Ocean City, Maryland, and places like that. And I thought, oh, well, I understand why you maybe you have a newfound appreciation of this place that you've been going to your entire life, and you want to see it one more time just in case. I get that. But the places that I think we're going to see people gravitating toward after the pandemic, so for their first post-pandemic vacation, are going to be places like Disney World in Orlando, Las Vegas, Miami, Los Angeles, and in Paris, London, the usual favorites in Western Europe. Hawaii is another big one too. Hawaii can't wait to have people over there. Unfortunately, now you still have to have a COVID test before you fly out there. But I was just on with a radio station in Honolulu last night, and they can't wait to have people back. The place is, it's a ghost town, basically. So, it's actually good for them. But I think that if you're thinking of going to a place that you've been to before, you should be prepared for some crowds.
Yeah, I've been, dying to go back. And, Mexico City is one of my favorite places to visit. I haven't been since the pandemic. And even though there's a million places I want to go, I am itching to sort of get back there. Because, you're sort of reclaiming the normal, right? You're like, maybe that's something to it.
Yeah.
So Christoper, we've talked a lot about things that have changed, for the, during the pandemic. I wonder, and we both of us want things to go back to quote unquote normal, but what's definitely not coming back? What have we learned from the pandemic that we're going to see really change the future of travel, next year and beyond?
Well, one thing people like about the changes that have happened since the pandemic are some of the airline policies, and even hotel policies. It used to be that if you tried to make a change to an airline ticket, they would charge you, $200 change fee, in some cases more than that if you're traveling internationally. And then, there were also some hotel policies that people did not like very much. For example, the cancellation fees that they charge, or the cancellation, they weren't fees, they were cancellation rules where if you canceled within 24 or 48 hours, you would get charged for a night. And And those have kind of gone away. And in some cases, the airlines have said, we're not bringing them back. So change fees, they've said they're not bringing them back. I think everyone is hopeful that those things will, those changes will be permanent. But I can tell you from my own experience in covering the travel industry is that, let's just take airline change fees, for example. Well, they promised to not bring the change fees back, but they may bring back a different type of fee at some point. And what's going to happen is that the travel industry is going to, as soon as we get the green light from the CDC and the CDC says it's okay to travel again, I think that they're going to start raising prices and adding as many fees as they possibly can to make up for the last year and a half of depressed business. And so I would say, you probably are going to want to enjoy this little mini era of lower prices and fewer fees, because it's not going to last forever.
And your other advice seems to be when things start to open back up, don't go to London, but go to some place that folks will think about later. Now might be the time to go to sort of the quirky place that you've been putting off. You might really have the place to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, right now you can get a hotel room almost anywhere for not a lot of money. You can fly almost anywhere without paying a lot of money. And the reason why is there's just not a lot of demand. So when demand goes down, prices go down too. Demand goes up, prices are going to go up. It always makes sense to go somewhere where demand is lower. And what I mean by that is, don't go skiing in March because that's when everyone else wants to be out on the slopes, except for this year. Instead, plan a mountain vacation in the fall. The Grand Tetons in the fall are so beautiful, and there's almost no one there. Everyone goes back to work in September, and they're missing the fall foliage, and it's so gorgeous. So those are just, I wrote a book called How to Be the World's Smartest Traveler. Those are some timeless pieces of advice that apply now more than ever, is that you don't want to go somewhere where everyone else wants to go.
Have you made your post-pandemic vacation plans yet?
Well, I got the first round of the vaccine on Saturday, and I'm scheduled for my next shot in March. And coincidentally, my contract on my rental runs out on the 9th. So I am getting into our car and driving to Texas that next day. And then from Texas back to Orlando. So I'm going to do the Disney thing and check that place out and see what's changed, and then work my way up the East Coast maybe, and then do a slow loop and come back to the West in time for fall.
And do we have any concept of how life will be different for folks who have the vaccine versus not? Like when you're booking flights or hotels or anything like that, do we have an inkling of how that's going to work? Are you going to have your vaccine card with you?
Well, I have my vaccine card right here. I'm holding it in my hand. It's not a very official looking document. I mean, it looks like someone filled it out by hand. And I could easily buy a stack of 100 of these CDC COVID-19 vaccination record cards, probably on the internet, and fill them out.
I've read all sorts of things like, Ticketmaster will have a way to verify you've gotten the vaccine so you can buy Hamilton tickets, stuff like that. We haven't seen that really play out in practice yet.
No, I haven't heard about anything like that. But I can tell you, though, that they're working on a vaccine passport. There's several different concepts that are out there that are being tested. It's probably going to be something that's smartphone based. And it remains to be seen whether the vaccine will be fully distributed before they get their act together and they actually have a vaccine passport, which would kind of, render the whole thing moot. But for now, at least, you have, your yellow card, which is something that the World Health Organization gives you, and that's where all of your vaccines are recorded. You probably are going to slide your little white COVID vaccination record card into that yellow card, and show it to someone if they ask you if you've had your vaccine. Lying about having a vaccine, though, is the most stupid thing that I can think of. So if you've, and I'm sure people are going to try to do that, it puts everyone's life in danger. I think we probably do need some secure way of determining whether or not someone's been vaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time today, and we're going to link in the show notes to your websites and your various social handles. So folks want to get in touch with you, they'll be able to. So thank you so much. And I think right now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment. That's where last stop. It's kind of a play because the train. Anyway, you get it. It's my favorite segment, your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment. And it's where you and I each share one thing, just one. If you bring two, you should save that second one for the next last stop. There's always a next last stop because there's always a next episode of Out of Office. So you bring one thing, and it could be anything. It could be an aspiration that you have. It could be a dream you had. Could be have a lived experience. Could be an object that reminds you of something. Could be something you bought, a piece of gear. Anything that feeds the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. And mid-pandemic, we're pretty workaday here. Now, Ryan, I would typically throw to you to say, "Hey, Ryan, have you brought a last stop this week?" But I know that you are digging, you're working on it. You are working on it. And within 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to have a real humdinger. So I am going to go first. Now, Ryan, I don't know, do you enjoy used bookstores?
I love used bookstores. We've done episodes here on bookstores worth traveling for.
But those are mostly new bookstores. I'm talking about used bookstores where you open the door and you're hit in the face with that musty kind of old library smell. And what I like about them is that, one, you often get a bunch of local characters in there, but you can also typically get books that are out of print, like things that you can't find on Amazon, things that are so buried in the libraries they might have sold them off at a $1 sale. And what I really recommend, a little travel tip and something I've applied myself, is if you live in a city with used bookstores, or if you're traveling someplace and you're really interested in the local history, like the deep local history, not like the Moon Guide 2-pager local history, but I'm telling you, you want to read a book on it. You want to hear about the personalities. You want to know about the heart and soul of this place. Go to the used bookstore and go to the local history section, and you can find some great tourism material there. And I have an example here. Hold it up to the camera. You can see lovely black and white photo here. And it's a book called Boston Statues by Walter Muir Whitehill, photographs by Catherine Knowles. And this is a very charming old guidebook. Let me see here. It was published in, it says 1970, and it's appropriately browned. And what they have done is they've gone all around Boston, and they've taken these lovely black and white photos of not just the iconic statues, not just the Paul Revere's and Sam Adams. Just flip into a random page. We got a Joseph Hooker. We've got a David Glasgow Fairgut. We've got a Thomas Cass and a Wendell Phillips. Now, do you know any of these people?
Sure. I mean, I know probably their relatives, from Civil War, from Revolutionary War reading that I've done from Boston.
Here's another one, Rufus Choate, a lovely name. And they have great little blurbs, little biographies of the people who are featured in these statues. And I mean, this one right here, Rufus Choate, turns out it's by Daniel Chester French, who, of course, famously made the Lincoln Memorial. I want to know more about Rufus Choate. How could that guy feel that Rufus Choate is anyone to live up to Lincoln? And what's lovely about these statue guides is, these statues are standing 40 years later. They're right down the street. And there are many in here that I've walked by. I've never known the stories behind them. And only by going in the used bookstore was I able to find Boston Statues by Walter Muir Whitehill. So it's a little bit of a tip. And it's a special book that I found. And I'm enjoying mid-pandemic going out and exploring some of these Boston statues.
Well, I think that is a perfect sort of segue into my visit to the Grounds for Sculpture. You know about the Grounds for Sculpture, Kiernan?
The Grounds for Sculpture? No, I don't know that.
So the Grounds for Sculpture is this 40-acre sculpture garden in Hamilton, New Jersey that was started by one of the Johnson & Johnson heirs and has...
Do you know whether it was Johnson or was it Johnson?
It was Johnson the second.
Okay. All right. The second, it's the Johnson post ampersand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And basically on the old grounds of the New Jersey State Fair, they built this sort of permanent sculpture gallery that just includes a lot of really sort of fun, magical, literary, and sort of pop culture-y statues. So you've got like a Marilyn Monroe statue. You've got like things inspired by Alice in Wonderland. And you've just got like a lot of really big sort of, maybe not the most tasteful stuff, not the most sort of abstract stuff that you might see in other sculpture gardens, but like really big, fun, sort of magical, examples of sculpture.
So so you feel that only abstract can be tasteful. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's not what I'm saying exactly. But I just mean like a huge statue of like a sailor, kissing a nurse or something.
So it sounds like it's a lot of kind of there's a bit of a little kitschiness, and there's a little classic Americana. I know Alice in Wonderland, not that, but the Marilyn Monroe, the sailor nurse.
Yeah, there's definitely a good Americana vibe going on there. And then very randomly, there's a Gloria Vanderbilt sculpture that's like a, like something out of like, I'll post it on the Insta. It is disturbing. It's like a Halloween sculpture. There's like decapitated, dolls and stuff in it. And it's like randomly by Gloria Vanderbilt. So, doesn't fit in with the rest of the sort of vibe of the place, which is more sort of family friendly and fun. But, I guess when Gloria offered a piece, they were like, hey.
What was your favorite bit?
My favorite is, so I posted a few weeks ago a photo of the sort of the birth of Venus. Which is the way that it's lit. It's like, this girl who looks like she is inside of a massive shell, and it's sort of fun. That's one of my, I think, favorite pieces. There's like a couple indoor sections, which were not open due to COVID, but for the most part, it is a very, COVID friendly activity because it's all outside and it's
I was about to say it feels like as close to an immersive experience as you can have these days.
Yeah, it's got I bet they do some really fun stuff around Halloween and it's a great sort of venue for that kind of thing.
And what was the name of it again? The sculpture grounds?
The Grounds for Sculpture.
The Grounds for Sculpture. Okay, is it like a public site? That feels like a public site.
It is.
Do you pay?
It is. You do have to pay. Yeah. It's like $10, I think. Something like that.
So yeah. Okay.
What are we talking about next week, Kiernan?
Ryan, the long anticipated. Actually, Boston Statues was
Rick Steves.
Listen, the quest continues. I've got emails in. I'm working the networks. I feel very good about Rick Steves coming through.
Anytime you say long awaited and it's not Rick Steves, it doesn't really feel that long awaited.
So. Rick Steves is going to happen. I still believe it, but no, next week is the second part of the Boston trilogy. We know these episodes where we deep dive into a city or a country are some of our most popular. And it struck me as odd that we hadn't done anything on where I live. So we've the first Boston episode, we covered kind of all the major hits, Boston Common, Faneuil Hall, the Freedom Trail, all the things you got to do if you're only here for a couple days. But this next one is the one I would most recommend, which is this is going to be like my personal list of places that you should be hitting, lesser known museums, sites that are maybe just on the outskirts of Boston or, local parks that aren't, number one in all the guidebooks, but which I feel.
Swing by Kiernan's for a nice breakfast. He'll host you.
Post-COVID, I would happily host anybody who contacts me beforehand, gives me several months' notice, and is willing to pay upwards of $1,000. I mean, Ryan, we're influencers now. We gotta, we need to value our time.
When we do our first live show back, or slash our first
you mean
live
our
show.
First live show?
Well, I think I debated, should it be Boston or should it be Brooklyn? I'm leaning towards Boston.
Well, we're gonna have to look at the listeners' numbers, and that can decide where we post it. So next week will be the second installment of the 3-part series, and I'm excited to bring it to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen to you tell me more about Boston. Well, Kiernan, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is seat taken? So, Ryan, do we think we're going to get a special new passport page saying if we're vaccinated? I would love it. You know, I like additions to my passport.
Yeah, there's going to be an app for that, probably.
Not an app. I want the paper. I want the souvenir. And for people who don't understand, you got to go back to that episode, one of the classics.